In a rundown place where a very beautiful girl was teaching English, Sho, a boy she teaches, suddenly confessed to her wholeheartedly. Despite him doing this every week, the girl didn't really mind his confession and unknowingly had set her up in the future, as she told her that she would reconsider marrying him once he was older. The little Sho asked specifically whether she would consider him, to which she replies, while teaching him that she would consider him when he is 18 years of age. However, once she had started middle school, he then had quit her tutor class but came in frequently just to ask if she got a boyfriend or not. Until a few years had passed and Sho hadn't visited her in a while, making her slightly reminisce about the time she was popular with the kids she was teaching. Sensei had drank a couple of beers as she mopes about not having any boyfriends despite the ripe age of 35. While dwelling in her loneliness, Sensei was thinking about Sho and had wondered whether finding a girlfriend was the reason as to why he had stopped visiting her. Though now that she's in the age of getting married, she wanted someone to propose to her like what Sho was doing, thus why she needed to be serious about marriage stuff and hop on a site to find someone she could marry. Suddenly, while scrolling, a person had rang her doorbell, making her get up and look who it was. The person on the other side called her, introducing himself as Shutaru. Her eyes started to quiver as she saw this handsome young lad in front of her asking her to marry him. The Sho that she once knew was no longer a kid but a man, and was someone she found very attractive. Sensei, a bit speechless, couldn't utter a word while Sho asked her about not being her ideal type. Sensei was quick to correct him that he was someone she was attracted to, but the pressing matter was that he was still in his high school uniform, freshly out of his school. It would make sense for him to do this stuff after he graduates. However, Sho couldn't wait any longer and wanted her right now. Ever since he saw Sensei knocking at his door, Sho had fallen for her right at that moment. He even faked liking speaking English when he learned that she's running a tutorial class for English. He then pleaded to his parents to fund his lessons in order to see her every day. As he began to see her every day, Sho's feelings for Sensei had grown as time went by. However, in middle school, Sho was getting teased when he told his friends that he wanted to marry her. Their teasing got to his head when they told him about him aging poorly as he turns 18, which made him visit her weekly, asking her what her ideal type and whether she was still single. While playing baseball, Sho started to feel pain towards his knees that caused him to collapse. It was revealed that he got a disease for exercising too much, along with the rapid growth his body was dealing with. When he got to 8th grade, Sho's mental health started to plummet as he saw how his body changed into an adult. It made him miserable, not knowing if Sensei would like what he was becoming, making him not want to see her because of this. As Sho grew into a fine man, girls at his age started confessing to him. Unfortunately for them, Sho has only one person in his mind, and that was Sensei. Now that he had now found the confidence to face her once again, Sho was very glad to see his Sensei once again. He finds her cute as she rambles towards herself, questioning if it was a bright idea to date him or even marry him because of their age gap. Sho, who was flooded with emotion, grabbed her and hugged her with his body, telling her that he was an adult now. While hugging, Sensei started to nag Sho as she told him that he was still a child in her eyes. Him hugging her doesn't hide the fact that he is a person who just turned 18, a person who still has a curfew to follow. She then continued to nag him about him, just blurting out the term marriage towards her face. She expressed that marriage is not just about people loving each other. He has to be someone well-established to take her as a wife. He needs to graduate, earn money, and be able to provide her needs in order for her to finally consider him as a potential suitor. As she nagged him, Sho couldn't help but stare and looked at her in awe as he hasn't experienced this in years, making him happy. Sensei found his admiration teasing her and pushed him out of his apartment, wanting him to go home since it was getting late. However, Sho was not finished questioning her and asked her whether she would marry her if he does all those things. Sensei was starting to get emotional as she reflected about her life and that Sho doesn't deserve someone who was boring and a slob like her. Her telling him that she wasn't as special at all had struck a chord in her memory, remembering the time she was dating someone who told her how bland she was. This triggered her and told Sho that it was better for him to date someone who was young and bubbly unlike her. Despite all that, Sho still wanted Sensei and was reassured by telling her that he loves her wholeheartedly. Everything she had said to her fell deep into his heart, wanting to become a full-fledged member of society for her. The only thing that would stop him from confessing to her every day was her finding happiness and a partner that is not him. But for now, he wouldn't rush things and reassured him that all of her flaws are something that he had always loved. After all, she is her sunshine. Sho was having fun pinching his sensei's cheeks when she started to call his bluff, saying that he only calls her his sunshine since her name is Hinata. With her face flushed, Hinata began to speak facts towards Sho, telling him that he doesn't really know who she was, and that they had only seen each other 3 years once a week, which signifies how little he knows her. Sighing, Hinata told Sho that he was a young lad, and her being in her mid-30s means that she doesn't really get to do the things he wanted to do with her, since by the time he gets at the right age to marry her, she would be wrinkly and old. Him choosing such a boring girl like her would be a mistake. Upon hearing this, Sho told Hinata that choosing her is his choice, and that no one could dictate who he chooses but him. He did think about the people who would talk about behind their back if ever their relationship did happen, but it doesn't matter. What mattered was that he would always live in the now, no matter what the future had stored between them two. Now that he will never change, ever change, that is why he asked Hinata to believe in him for a little bit. Hinata, who was a bit skeptical, told him that people change. No one in the universe remains stagnant, even her. Shu, who has infinite riz, told Hinata that the only thing he wanted to change was her coming to love him. Hinata, who was clearly flushed, told Sho to go home. Sho told Hinata that he would go back and that legally speaking they can get married right now if they wanted to. However, Hinata stood her ground and told him that marriage isn't easy like that. He needed to persuade her first. Sho took her world and promised her that he would work hard and would not stop until she sees her as a man. Until then, he would keep coming back. Before he left, Sho told Hinata that now he was 18, they could do anything. Back from her apartment, Hinata was fuming about crying to a 18-year-old boy, someone younger than her, and couldn't believe how cheeky he had grown up into. At the bath, Hinata started to dwell about the things that happened before and how Sho was willing to accept her despite the flaws that she had presented to him. Although his words made her heart flutter, he was still young. While looking at the mirror, Hinata couldn't stop thinking about the last thing Sho had told her and thought that he was talking about doing the devil's tango. Meanwhile, Sho was getting a text from the girl who confessed to him and asked him if it was okay for her to call. Sho declined and remembered that he should have asked for Hinata's number. Morning came and Sho was at Hinata's doorsteps with a bright smile, thinking about how she was very beautiful. Although Hinata didn't let him in his house since he wasn't his student anymore, Sho was perfectly fine to stand outside while looking at her. While Sho was bombing her with compliments, Hinata started to think about Sho's motive. She began to wonder whether his intention was pure or he just wanted her for her body. Hinata's thoughts were interrupted when Sho asked about wanting to talk about his career. He wanted to know her opinion about him going to work when he graduated high school. Although that was a nice idea, Hinata told Sho that it would be much better to not rush towards his future and maybe think about what he wanted to do first. Sho then told her about the job he wanted to take, which was an airplane mechanic, and if it were okay for her to wait for him for 3 years since they were going to get married. Hinata started to get red again and scolded him about still wanting to marry her. Even though Sho understood Hinata's stance about marrying students, Sho was worried about making Hinata wait for him for 3 years while he finishes another time of school. Back when Sho was still in middle school, he told Hinata about him not being able to come to her house every week. Hinata asked why he couldn't, but Sho couldn't answer, which Hinata understood that it was something difficult for him as to why she casually changed the subject and asked him about school. While they were conversing, Sho asked Hinata whether she would stay in this place for long. Hinata, who had a smile on her face, told Sho that she would be in this place for a long, long time because she loved what she was doing. Sho's face had brightened up and had made a promise with Hinata that he would be waiting for him even though he couldn't come any longer. In the present, Hinata remembered Sho making the same face when he was little and that he was also wanting for her to wait for him back then. While she remembered that memory, Hinata can't help but laugh and tell Sho about him doing the same thing he was in middle school. and assuming he was telling her that because Sho got a girlfriend. Sho told Hinata that he told her that because he was having awful growing pains at that time of his life, and that she doesn't have to worry now because he is fine. Hinata then reminded Sho that by 3 years, she would become 38 years old and asked him whether he would meet girls while going to technical school. Sho was surprised by her sudden question and got a bit pissed. He then told her that there would be girls, but he wouldn't be interested in them since they aren't Hinata. Hinata, who got flustered again, hid her face as his sudden flirtatious outburst made her heart skip a beat. Sho then thanked Hinata for the advice and asked Hinata to wait for him until then. While Sho was leaving, Hinata didn't know what she was going to do towards Sho, who got her emotions riled up and thought that she needed to do something about it. Sho, on the other hand, was slightly dejected from acting cool about making her wait for 3 years. It made him want to hurry up and find a good career, but couldn't do such a thing without sacrificing a bit of his years for that. While contemplating, Sho got worried about Hinata finding someone while he was away and didn't know what to do if ever that happened, which made him just want to get a job to be with her sooner. At Hinata's apartment, Hinata was thinking about making Sho give up on her and thought about turning him down. She got a bit distracted when her phone started to notify her about signing up for the app she was going to use to find a suitable partner. Although she was feeling a bit guilty, as she remembered Sho wanting her to wait for him. She decided that it would be best for the two of them for her to sign up for the app and finally find someone who is the same age as her. Meanwhile, the girl who confessed to Sho the other day was prying about Sho towards Sho's friends. She was asking her about Sho avoiding her, asking who he was in love with, and whether he was actually into guys as to why he rejected her. Sho's friends, who didn't know how to cover all of this up, just told her that Sho was just busy planning his future and had no time for chicks like her. The girl misunderstood them and thought that they were saying that she just needed to work harder for him to notice her and left them to go home. His friends, who can finally breathe, know that she was gone, thought that telling her that was a better option than telling her that he was actually in love with an older baddie who's definitely much prettier than all of them combined. At school, Sho was thinking about going to Hinata's house, but stopped when he thought about Hinata finding him annoying if he were to come to her house every day. Instead, he thought that maybe it would be better to look for a part-time job so he could ask her on a date with the money he earns in the said job. He was about to go when Fujieda asked if he was heading home. The two got into a bit of a conversation about going to university when Sho told Fujieda that he was going to go. Fujieda, who grabbed him by the arm, tried to stop him by making him get something in the art room, which was the sculpture she did in her second year that won a prize in an exhibition. Sho was grabbing it by the pillows when Fujieda told him that the sculpture was modeled based on her body. Flustered, Sho almost broke the sculpture as he heard the info coming out of her mouth. Fujieda laughed, telling him that it was just a joke, and instead told him that the sculpture was an embodiment of what she wanted her body to be, and that the only thing that was modeled to her likeness was the face of the sculpture. Fujieda added that she wanted to have a body like this so that she could show it to Sho someday. That statement made Sho very confused, making Fujieda confess once again and apologize about being persistent. She revealed that she couldn't give up on him after all. Almost crying, Fujieda told Sho how much she liked him and began to strip her clothes. She told him that he wanted to look at her just this once and maybe he would get to know her more. Sho apologized and rejected her once again, telling her that he couldn't do such things. Unfortunately, Fujieda responded to the rejection poorly, but continuously stripping despite Sho stopping her for doing something she would regret. She told Shout that he had always liked him, and that his kind and gentleness towards her was something that drew her towards him. She wasted Sho to do anything towards her, and it would be okay since he is the person that she likes. Sho rejected her once again by telling her that he couldn't see her beyond being friends and couldn't return those feelings towards her. This set Fujieda on edge and called Sho, making him look at her exposed, naughty pillows. Sho was beyond shocked to see her exposed like that and immediately grabbed his things and left the premise as fast as he could, leaving Fujieda behind. Fujieda was hurt from the reaction Sho gave and cried on the floor, sad that someone she liked rejected her, despite giving everything she could give. Fujieda ran and ran until he reached a shed in the middle of the park. He remembers seeing Fujita's body and couldn't accept that he was feeling some kind of way as he saw those things in front of them. It made cry and was reassuring him that he had set his mind towards Hinata and that she was the person she only wanted. It was hurting him that he had seen someone's body instead of Hinata's and cried about why this kind of stuff was happening to him.